Lord Victus, a young courier called. We received a message from the King of Everpeak. Lord Victus turned swiftly to the young courier, his hand outstretched to receive the letter. Quickly breaking the seal and reading over the message, Thal waved a dismissive hand and the courier set off. King Thunderhelm would like us to send a force along with a small retinue of his to retake some land he lost. Well, my lord, what would you have of us? A knight asked, to which Thal responded. Gather a force and march to the location provided. Thal handed over the letter to his subject. The Dwarf King may use my forces to beat back his foe, but we will make sure that he owes us for it. The knight quickly bowed and ran off to gather his men and march off to battle. Meanwhile, Lord Victus would remain in his port city to oversee the continued construction of his fleet and its defenses. War would eventually come to his home, and he would be sure that every precaution was taken for its safety. Hi everyone, Materim here again with another narrative battle report. This time we have the Elves, supported with a little bit of Dwarven allies, taking on the League of Rhordia under General Cesare Bresaro. We are playing the eliminate scenario here, and so obviously that hill that's in the middle of the board, that has the center marker on it that's worth 2 points. And as we discuss the deployment, I will note for each side which of the units have the bounty tokens on them. Okay, and before I talk about the deployment for the elf side, one thing I want to make note of is that my opponent put together his list from an online from easyarmy.com, but did not actually click the 2018 Clash of Kings link to it. So there are certain things that are incorrect here, but we just played it as was. So starting off here on the left, he has a allied Iron Belcher organ gun. Then there is a unit of Iron Guard. In the forest there is a horde of the Therenian Sea Guard. They have the Brew of Keen-Eyedness, which again is illegal, but we caught that early on, so just essentially discounted it. So my opponent does have, in essence, a 45-point deficit here. Behind that, you can see a Elven Prince on a horse with the saber-toothed pussycat and the wings of Honey Maze. Then there is a second unit of regiment of Iron Guard. Behind them is a Elven Mage with the spells Fireball, Lightning Bolt, and Saber-Tooth Pussycat, and the Fenulian Amulet. Also this, oh no, I'm sorry, that is not the Mage. The Mage is the one all the way to the right there, and it's on the horse. What that figure is actually his army standard bearer with the healing charm. Sorry about that. Next is a unit of Stormwind Cavalry Regiment with the Helm of Confidence. And as you can see by the blue token, that is one of the units I have to, the bounty units. The Horde is also, on the left of the screen there, is also one of the bounty units. So those are those two. Then he has a regiment of Palace Guard with a Brew of Strength. Next to that is a second Iron Belcher organ gun, and again, since it's allied, this shouldn't be allowed either, but I didn't even think about this being wrong until I just sat down to do the report, so we just kind of went with it. Then there is a second unit of Stormwind Cavalry. These guys have the Crystal Pendant of Retribution and are also the third unit that I have to collect the bounty on. And then at the far end is a Noble War Chariot with the Diadem of Dragonkind. So starting on the left with my force, I don't have any allies. This is all League. We start with a Halfling Volley Gun. Next to that is a regiment of City Spear Militia. Behind that is a regiment of House Guard with the Scrying Gem. Next to the Spearman is a Halfling Iron Beast, which is one of my bounty tokens. Behind that is a City Militia Horde with the Pipes of Terror. You see there's a second City Spear Militia Regiment. Behind that is my Army Standard Bearer. He has the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. Then in the forest, which is pretty tightly packed here, we have a unit of Halfling Scouts. Right behind them is a regiment of Halfling Archers. You can barely see the tip of it in front of the tree, but there is a second Halfling Volley Gun there. Next to that is a Musket Block Regiment with the Brew of Keen-Eyedness. Behind that is my Duke on the Ancient Winged Elves. Then there is a regiment of Honor Guard and a Household Knight Regiment with the Potion of the Caterpillar. The Knight Regiment and my Duke on the Ancient Winged Elves are the two other units that he has to claim for his bounty. So my opponent wins the roll to go first and decides to take advantage of it. Starts coming up here pretty hard on the right flank. And is more conservative in the middle. He hides his flyer behind the hill so I can't do any shooting on him. And starts moving things up. Mainly because he didn't have a line of sight with the organ gun here. He decides to move it rather than try to shoot anything. But he's just trying to make sure he's got cover on these lanes on either side of the hill. Again, moves up his war machine on this side as well, and other than that is pretty conservative on things. He does some shooting with the Horde on these spearmen. They end up landing only a single wound, which has no effect. Then we go to my turn, and I decide to put, essentially giving him only one charge here. He has a charge into the Knights, but I positioned myself so that he's going to go into that water. Since I've got the Potion of the Caterpillar, I really don't care. And he has a charge into the front of the Rifleman here, I believe, with his marked cavalry on the right. But I figure if he's going to go in there, he's going to get hindered. Probably isn't going to take that unit out, and I can kind of come back at him with some stuff. At least that's my hope. Over here, I move up so that I am just barely outside of the range of his organ guns, because I don't want to get blown away. And since he has so much more movement than me, I've decided just to kind of give him some time to extend himself and see where he's going before I commit. I'm pretty tightly packed here, and he's going to have to go through some less useful units to give me some counter charges. So I'm kind of seeing if he'll take that bait. And over here, other than a little bit of turning, there's nothing else on this flank as well. I open up some shooting on this unit and get 6 wounds, but it doesn't go anywhere. And then I open up with the organ gun on this side and put 3 wounds on his Horde. Then my... Oh, no. This must be his turn too. Yep, because he started moving around. His cavalry unit disappeared and it confused me for a minute there. But yeah, he's just moving here. He's not really extending anything. He doesn't want to give me a charge. But over here, he does choose to take the charge with his cavalry against the riflemen. And then just brings up the other cav to support them and pushes his dwarf unit onto the hill so he can just hold that, since it is worth 2 points to him if he can maintain it till the end of the game. And over here he starts advancing the other dwarves as well. I think his plan is to essentially take them around the left side of this building here and swoop along my units there. He ends up doing some shooting and puts some more, like 6 more wounds on the spearmen and wavers them. He does some shooting over here. I think it's the lightning bolt from his wizard, puts 2 wounds on my knights. And I don't know why this picture is turned, but he ends up only actually putting 4 wounds on my rifleman, mainly due to the hinder. And I'm wavered and he bounces off, which is not a really great position for him to be in. So we go to my turn 2. I decide to go ahead and push forward rather than letting the other cavalry unit that you can see on the left side here get into my knights and slow me down. So I essentially make sure that my general and my knights are out of his line of sight and trying to sweep along his back flank. I actually found out when I looked at it here that my honor guard weren't in a position to really countercharge these knights he threw at me because I was in their front and there's not enough room for me there. So I just kind of move up and tilt a little bit so that I'll be in their flank for the next charge. And I figure I'll just use all this shooting I have right next to him to go for him. You can also see, and I didn't get a picture of this last turn, he took his flying character and essentially snuck it past my front lines. So I'm having to kind of redirect some stuff to try and use the Iron Beast to take it out with its breath weapon. And so over here, I definitely don't want him in the middle of me, so I move up some spearmen. The other spearmen being wavered really kind of choked me up at this point, so I just reformed the city militia to kind of go through that gap when I can get rid of them. So pretty much what you see here is what you get. I think he was going after my character, but I ran him out of the way and put the Iron Beast up front instead to shoot at him. Over here, I do some shooting. This unit's up to 8 wounds and gets wavered, which certainly helps. I end up breathing and not doing hardly anything. I get 1 wound off this guy and it doesn't hurt him. Then we go into turn 3 for the elves. He charges his chariot into my general on the Elves and moves his wizard around so I can't get a clear charge on him. He just advances up here in the center. You can see I did put 2 wounds on the dwarves on the hill from shooting last turn. I just didn't take a picture of it. And his dwarves start moving around the house as well. He opens up some more shooting and blows my spearmen off the board, which I guess is good because it's cleared that space open for me now, but I was kind of hoping to double charge the dwarves on the hill with them, so I guess we'll have to see what I can do without that. He puts 1 more wound on my knights here with a lightning bolt. Couple more wounds on this spearman here. And he did actually charge the halfling scouts with his other cavalry. Even though he was hindered here, he ends up blowing through them, chooses to advance, and ends up an inch off of my halfling bowman. And over here, he only does 2 wounds to my general, but rolls well enough with those double 6s that I am wavered, and that's really kind of obnoxious. So we go to my turn 3. I can just barely see the bottom corner of the chariot, so I go ahead and throw myself in there. And over here, I bring the honor guard into the flank of his first cavalry unit on the right. That should be relatively easy because I'm not hindered and I'm going to hurt him bad. I throw the tank into the flank of this cavalry unit, and I throw my city militia into the flank of his character, or in the front of his character, sorry. If I can kill this character and overrun, I only need like 2.5, 3 inches, something like that, to hit the flank of this cavalry unit, and they are going to go bye-bye. So that makes me super happy. You can also see, just to get stuff out of the way, I charged with the spearmen at the dwarves, figuring maybe I can sneak through a wound or 2. And over here, I start advancing my house guard to go support everybody. I really didn't get much else going on in terms of shooting, so we go into combat. My knights absolutely demolish his chariot, and I reform as such. My honor guard demolish his cavalry that's here, and I get my first bounty token, so 2 points for routing them in close combat. My horde absolutely murders his character, and they overrun, so this is going to be just bad news for this cavalry unit. And yeah, between the horde, who I believe the horde, I actually succeeded in getting Bane Chant off on them, so they were just throwing down. Between them and the tank, we demolished the second cavalry unit, which means it's only like turn 3 for me, and I've already gotten 2 of my bounties, so I'm sitting at 4 points. This battle is going very, very well for me. Another turned picture for some reason. But on top of the hill, I end up doing only a few wounds to the dwarves, but I roll well enough where they're wavered, so I bounce off and kind of fall off the hill, but I'm actually only an inch off of them. It's just the way this hill is set up, I can't sit there, but we know where we're at. But they're wavered, so that is amazing news. So we go into Elf's turn 4. He decides to keep running circles around me with his wizard and hoping to take my knights out with lightning. He countercharges the spearmen with his dwarves again and charges his palace guard into the front of my cannon. Looks like they picked up some wounds. Maybe that was from last round's shooting, because I still have the volley gun there. I bet I hit him last turn, but he's going in there hoping to take out the tank. I don't think he's really got a great shot at it unless he gets just really lucky. The tank's pretty solid, and I've got a lot of counterattack ready for him if he tries it. Over here, he keeps sneaking his dwarves around the building. The way it's set now, he can actually see my halfling volley gun here, so he'll be able to charge it next turn. During shooting, he puts several more wounds on the knights. They're up to 5 wounds, but he can't hit the nerve check. He also opens up with his organ gun here and puts 7 wounds on the honor guard, but not enough to rout or waver them. And then over here, between his shooting and the organ gun, he blows the house guard off the map. During combat, the dwarves absolutely demolish my spearmen, and he reforms. So the left flank here is rapidly going away, and it's got me kind of nervous. My only hope here is not letting him get my important units. I've already collected 4 victory points, and if I can keep him from getting any more, or any, that's just the way I got to go. Over here, he did a lot more than I thought he was going to do. Put 6 wounds onto the tank, but I didn't waver or break. So we go to my turn 4. I decide to start looping around here. I was actually being really cautious because I was thinking, oh, well, he can turn around with that cannon and get me, thinking rules for other games, but they can't spin around and fire. So that's good for me, and now that I remembered that, I'm pushing on pretty hard to loop around and start getting his stuff here in the center and the back lines. Over here, I decide to go ahead and bring it in on the palace guard. I end up being able to charge with the tank. They went in, and then I had just enough of a pivot to connect right at the edge of the palace guard with the horde, which then let me slide down and end up in the position you see here. I'm figuring between these 3 units, those guys are gone, and now after that, it'll just be a matter of taking out the dwarves on the hill and claiming that token as well. I end up throwing some heal on the knights and heal all but one of their wounds, so they're only sitting on one wound now. So that was fantastic. And then I shoot with my volley gun at his volley gun and I blow it up. And the Palace Guard obviously aren't going to succeed in staying alive against roughly half of my army, so they go away. And I reform everything as you see here. Okay, this is his turn 5. So he brings his army standard bearer behind the dwarves and heals. I think this is after he's healed them up, so they're only at 4 wounds. He brings his wizard down here and starts dealing with my shooting because he's realizing it's pretty horrifying. And what you see now, the dwarves are still coming around because during my last move phase, rather than shooting with this thing, I moved it up so that he can't see it around the hill. So he's got his dwarves chasing a war machine around. During his magic phase, he lightning blasts my musket block, does a couple more wounds, but ends up wavering them. He does some shooting with his archers in the woods back there, but only puts 1 wound on my horde. And then we go to my turn. Basically, I'm thinking the dwarves are coming around the building, so I turn my volley gun to face that way. I turn my halfling archers to try and shoot at his character. And in the center, I end up charging with the tank and the horde of militia to the front of the dwarves. And I actually realized that I was just within range and line of sight to charge my general into his flank, so I'm hoping this will be enough. Given the size of that unit, there was no way I could get the honor guard in as well, so I'm just going to have to do with that. And I'm pretty sure I can take this out with this kind of heavy combined charge. You can see up top my knights are pushing hard to go deal with those archers, which is my last token I need to get for the bounty. End up doing some shooting. I'm getting like 5 shots needing 6s due to the level of cover and individual and all that. But I managed to sneak a wound through. I end up doing some shooting. Oh yeah, I shoot with my organ gun or my volley gun on this side at his character and inflict 1 wound there. And then we go to combat and the dwarves just cannot handle the overwhelming force I bring against him, and I overrun. I'm basically an inch off of his character with my militia block. His turn, he moves up right to the side here, is going to try and do some more damage to my... I don't know if he at this point if he's going for the musket block or my honor guard there. Over here, he decides to give up chasing the war machine around and about faces, but given the speed of dwarves is probably too late. And he decides to go out like a man and swings forth with his Thracian Sea Guard against my horde. He doesn't really have anything else to do, so we go into combat, throws some more wounds on them. It looks like 9, but he doesn't rout or waver me, so he bounces off an inch. So we go to my turn. I believe this is turn 6. I move up so that I'm taking a little bit less penalty to shoot. And over here, I decide to go ahead and throw in. I've got the horde and the tank going into the front of the Sea Guard. I've got my knights going into his character who he had moved there. And if they can kill him, they're going to overrun almost certainly into that big fight. And those guys should be not long for this world. And that's exactly what happens. I just demolish that Bannerman and overrun, and this is just going to be painful for my opponent. And it exactly was. So I kill him, get my last bounty token, so I'm up to 6 bounty tokens to 0 at this point. And we roll to see if there is a turn 7. And there is, in fact, a turn 7. So he goes ahead and advances. Not really sure why. There's no way I could get to his gun, but that's what he's doing. And over here he advances, or no, he didn't even need to advance. He takes another shot trying to take out my general with lightning, ends up putting 3 wounds, but does not rout him. But the volley gun on this side does open up on the tank and kills him, so my opponent claims 1 victory point for having destroyed one of the bounty units with ranged fire. And so my bottom of turn 7, I just back up with the horde so that I'm within 3 inches of the center token so that I can claim that as well. As the last of the elvish forces broke and ran, General Cesare Bresaro looked across the battlefield to the one remaining unit of dwarfs. "Tell your coward of a king that if he wishes to oppose the League of Rhordia, he should face us with his own forces." The general looked on as the pride of the dwarves battled with their wisdom, and chuckled as the unit ultimately chose to abandon the field. "Nikolai!" the general called forth his bannermen. "Signal the men to stand down. It will be only a matter of time before the King of Everpeak recovers his courage and seeks conflict with us again. We must take the time to repair our defenses and be about our work." The bannermen saluted and left to obey his order. General Bresaro looked out across the field. It was unusual that the dwarves so quickly called upon their allies to engage with his forces. Perhaps the alliances between the different civilizations of this island were stronger than he had been led to believe. It would be wise for him to attempt to forge some alliances of his own. Fortunately, his scouts had told him of the tribe of ogres called Winter's Bite, whose lands abutted those the League had claimed. No doubt the ogres would be quite eager to earn some easy money keeping whatever riffraff the dwarves could summon out of his hair. Alright, so end of turn 7. The League of Rhordia wins this one pretty big. 8 victory points to 1. I got all 3 of my bounties, plus claimed the center objective, and my opponent only managed to pick off 1 of my bounty units with shooting, so he got the 1 point there. If I really look at it, I think my army pretty much performed exactly like it was supposed to. I put kind of overwhelming infantry force there in the center, hoping to eventually chew through whatever he had and claim that. And being that 2 of my 3 units that he had bounties on were very quick, my idea was to keep them out of danger and wreak as much havoc with them as I could. I was able to circle around him. My opponent's biggest mistake, I think, was sending his cavalry pretty much by themselves into that forest to deal with my shooting. He really should have figured out another way to do that, because all it did is the hindering stopped him from actually breaking those units and being able to reform, and it just set me up for some combo charges that was able to wipe him off the map. So I would say part of the issue is that my opponent has only played dwarves up to this point. This is his first time with elves. So he's not really used to handling cavalry and kind of what they could accomplish. So I think he threw them into me just to kind of see what would happen. But it ultimately wasn't really the best way for it to work. I also don't necessarily know that at least what units he used, if the combination between elves and dwarves is that great, or if they are, kind of how he might have done it better. If it were me, I probably would have put both of those dwarf blocks in the center and used them to hold that objective together instead of putting the one on the outside. They're just not fast enough to work those flanking maneuvers. If he had put his knights over there instead, he could have probably gotten around that flank. The big benefit is that I had the scrying gem, so he dropped pretty much, I want to say he dropped all of his infantry units, like before I had to drop 1 unit before him, but I basically saw exactly where he was building and was able to really take advantage of that. So I think that scrying gem is an amazingly good magic item, and is one that I think is rapidly earning a place in pretty much any list I build. But other than that, it was a very good game in my opinion. My opponent was a little frustrated at some of the mistakes he made, But I definitely think it was a learning experience for him as well. I think I'm finally starting to get a hold on the rules of this game. I don't think that we made any, or that I made any big mistakes. I know my opponent kind of made some mistakes in building his list not using the 2018 rules, but uh, he certainly learned about that and some of the other tactical issues he had. I definitely like the combined forces, like the shooting and the combat that the League can bring about. So I'm very, very pleased with that. I think the only thing I really want to get to add to the army is I need some more halfling troops. As I'm sure you guys noticed, the halfling archers I was using were actually humans. I just need to get me some more halflings, and I like the idea of maybe instead of using the human spearmen, use the halfling spearmen. Since they have stealthy, they'll be a little harder to shoot down, and see if that would work. But if you guys have any suggestions, I would be happy to hear them, either in terms of how I could kind of change up my list or what I could do with it, or if you know any good places to find a lot of halfling minis, that would be super helpful. But hope you guys enjoyed this one. Also, if you have any uh, advice for my opponent in terms of getting into the elves, that would be very helpful as well. But again, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will catch you on the next one.